Hello, welcome to another episode of the Inquisition. I'm Northy from the wargaming team, Epic Flail, and in today's episode, I'm going to be asking the question, are there too many rules in Warhammer 40,000 for this to be a decent competitive rule set? To get to the bottom of that, I'm going to split this into two sections. The first thing is we're going to look at the rules. Are there too many rules? We're going to ask the question, is there a rules bloat? And if we think there is, I think there might just be, then the second question we're going to ask is, does it matter? Is that a problem from a competitive perspective? Does the rules bloat affect the competitive nature of Warhammer 40,000? And if it does, is that a good thing or a bad thing? I'm also going to talk about another one of my games I had recently, a great game at the King and Queen, which is it's actually a pub, but they have a great club and competitive league, casual competitive league that is running there every week in Brighton. I had a really good game against Anthony, so I'll talk a little bit about my game and some of the reflections that I had. But first, I want to get right into it and ask that question, is there a rules bloat in Warhammer 40,000? While you're here, please like and subscribe for more content. And if you didn't see my first episode on the Competitive Inquisition, I don't mind pointing that way. I feel like it's over there. I feel like that's the past and it's over there. Go check it out. Go find it. Go watch it. Let us know what you think in the comments. Okay, so the first question, is there a rules bloat in Warhammer 40,000? Yes. I'm joking. I mean, there is. But let's get into it a little bit of detail. So, Warhammer 40,000, the rules themselves, I don't feel are that taxing as a rule set to get in your head. Mainly because I've played it since I was a kid, and I feel like most wargamers are fully aware of Warhammer 40,000, have bought and painted some Space Marines, probably horrendously at some point as they were a kid, painted them really badly. And like everyone's aware of like the weapon skill system, the ballistic skill system, strength and toughness, saving throws and all that kind of thing. So as wargamers, most of us are like familiar and relaxed about the rules because we've played them at some point. But like 9th edition, the core rules I don't think are overly complicated. There's not that much to learn. There's not that much to remember. But once you then stack on top the army that you play, you've then got a bunch of units to take into consideration. Again, this is nothing unusual in a war game. Like, you will want diversity, lots of different units doing different things. It would be kind of naff if everything was just the same and you just had this endless battle of like, you hit on threes and I hit on threes, you won on fours, I won on fours, everything's the same. That'd be awful. So it's good to have like list diversity and unit diversity and see that in an army book. So that's fine. That's another lot of rules that you need to get in your head and learn. You've then got your army specific rules, which again is nothing unusual in the world of wargaming. You want your army to have something unique about it and some specific rules that you can learn and engage with and essentially have a play style attached to them. Pretty normal at this point. I will make an observation that the army that I'm learning, the Imperial Knights, there are a lot of rules. So like, there's the unit rules, which are fine, but then there's like a chivalric code that you've got to get your head around, and then you pick a particular house which has a certain play style and abilities that will affect it, and then you have like rules for the super walkers, rules for the smaller guys. So there's lots and lots of rules that kind of stack on top of each other. You've got the bondsman abilities. There's a lot to take in just in that one army book and that one codex. But again, nothing unusual at this point. It gets a little bit bloated when you then take into consideration all the stratagems that you have available. Let me put a quick picture up of someone. I saw this on Reddit of someone that was like, I've been to a tournament, you know, or you can see for yourself, like, here are all the cards that I don't use. Here are the cards that I use once a tournament. Here are the cards that I use every game. There's a lot of cards in there, not only to keep a track of and be aware of, but ones that you just don't ever need, but you've probably read and got in your head at some point. So the stratagems that you can use within your army, I mean, there's a lot to take. There's a lot there. There is a huge amount of rules and stratagems that just within your army you can deploy and use throughout the game. Still, it's not completely overwhelming at this point. But then remember, we're thinking about this from a competitive perspective. So when it's a competitive perspective, you're going to need to know pretty much all the rules. Well, definitely all the rules if you want to achieve a high level, or certainly all the rules that are relevant, all those codexes which are doing well. So when you take into consideration all that stuff you've got to learn, but then every single codex, every single other army book, you need to have a good grasp and understanding of what their units do, what their rules are, and their stratagems. It's starting already to feel like quite a lot of information to get into your head. Then take into consideration the actual game you play and the scenario you're playing. You're going to need to control objectives and get objectives off your opponent to score victory points. Pretty standard. Obviously, there needs to be some system of managing a winner of a game. That doesn't feel too unusual. But the bit where it starts to feel very bloated and very intense is you pick 3 secondary objectives and your opponent picks 3 secondary objectives. And then this was one of my main observations from the game the other week. So through the game, you're going to need to know what your stuff does, what the army rules for the army rules that are available to your models, what all the stratagems do, what the objective is on the table, what the 3 secondary objectives you have, and then all that for your opponent. So your opponent's models, your opponent's stratagems, where your opponent's at with their objectives, and your opponent's 3 secondary objectives. So if we just forget all the unit stuff and all the stratagems and just focus on the game itself. So imagine 40k was just every unit is the same and there's no additional rules. It's almost like just everything hits on the 3 wounds on the 4s and we've got like 3 6-man units. That's it. No other rules. You still got to keep a track of the objective scoring and 6 secondaries objectives. And obviously that's not Warhammer 40,000. There are all these rules that you then pile on top. So the playing experience at a decent level, at a competitive level, feels, compared to other games, an exceptional amount of rules to keep a track of, and just a lot of bookkeeping. So a lot of the objectives and the secondary objectives are scored at completely different times in the game. So there's a lot of bookkeeping to log and remember when you're scoring certain things. And then the stratagems, of which there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds across the game, they could all be used at different times in the game as well. So is there a rules bloat? Bloat would infer that there are too many rules and Games Workshop are just piling rules on top of rules on top of rules. Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. There's so many rules, it's absolutely ridiculous. There's so many things just to keep track of in the game. Now, the latest World Eater book, it seems like they toned that down a little bit. They were like, maybe we just get ready for the next edition. And this is one of the things that they've got feedback on, that like, there are too many rules, it's bloated, trim it down. So maybe, hopefully, this is something Games Workshop have realised and done something about. But the question we're interested in asking at the moment, once we get to the conclusion that, yes, there is a rules bloat, is that a problem? Is this a good thing or a bad thing for Warhammer 40,000 as a competitive rule set? So let's break down what I think some of the pros and cons are to this. Let's start with the cons, because there are quite a few. Okay, so the first thing is that when you have rules bloat, and when there's a lot to keep track of, and I saw this in War Machine a lot, is gotchas, i.e. moments in a game where your opponent's like, ha, gotcha, you didn't... I mean, they don't always do this. If they do this, they're an absolute prick. They shouldn't do this. They shouldn't be like, I got you. It shouldn't even be a thing that they say, but it's a point in the game where something happens that you didn't see coming, and they get you. They're like, gotcha. Again, they don't say that. If they do say that, stop playing them. They're absolute crank. But it's a moment where you think, I didn't see that coming, and it heavily affects the outcome of the game. So when you have lots of rules, that is more likely to happen. And a lot of people I've spoken to that I trust, people I've known from competitive gaming in other games, or just people that I've met once I started playing 40k, a lot of people are like, oh yeah, no, I lost to that, I didn't realise it. Oh, that got me, that was really annoying. Now, Warhammer 40,000 is different to other games that I've played, like War Machine, where a gotcha will just literally end you the game. I didn't realise you could kill my caster like that. Game's over, finished. It's like losing your king in chess. Instant loss. I mean, gotchas can definitely swing and have a strong implication on the game and put you on the back foot. But in Warhammer 40,000, just you're basically playing a number of turns. It's not just instantly over. The gotchas aren't of severe. But the number of rules and how much you have to take into consideration, the amount of stuff going on, does mean that this will happen a lot. There will be a lot of gotchas when people play, particularly at a competitive level, when people are trying to win rather than just have a fun, casual experience. Appreciate that in casual games, people should be like, oh, mate, don't do that. I've got a thing that can let you do that. Or they'll go, oh, don't worry, take it back. You didn't realise, take it back. In a competitive game, those things don't happen. People say, well, you should have, yeah, next time you won't fall for it. And to be honest, let's evaluate the impact of gotchas that you shouldn't. Like, good competitive gamers, that will happen to you once, and then you go, okay, I'm not going to let that happen again. And if that keeps happening, maybe there's something else going on about how you reflect or just process a game that you need to do to stop that happening. So gotchas don't destroy the whole nature of competitive gaming. It shouldn't happen to people regularly, but it's an issue because it does create a very big skill gap between the best players and everybody else, because the journey to becoming a best player just means you have to absorb so many rules just to avoid all the gotchas. Now, you can do some things to mitigate against this by just focusing on, if you've got limited time and resource you can apply to learning a game, just focus on the main factions or the things that people are playing. There isn't a huge amount of list diversity in Warhammer 40,000, so if you dedicate time to just keeping on top of the main factions that are being used, then you're probably going to be okay, but that doesn't protect you against some random guy you've never seen before rocking up with a random list being like, what the hell? I didn't see that coming. So gotchas I think are a little bit of a negative. They're always going to exist at some level in a competitive game, but man, I feel like there are a lot in Warhammer 40,000. The next issue I think with rules bloat is it creates a long process and a long journey to get to the top of the game. The best games are easy to play, difficult to master, and while Warhammer 40,000 is easy to play as a rule set, the amount of rules that exist outside the rule book and the amount of things to keep track of make it hard to master. What I think competitive games should do is get you as quickly as possible to a point by which you understand everything that's going on, and then you can really absorb yourself in how to get better at the game. But the challenge with Warhammer 40,000 is because there are so many rules and so many different things that can happen to you, so many stratagems, it makes it difficult to get to that level. Now, it's not impossible, and loads of people clearly do it. So again, this isn't like world-ending doom and gloom, that's it, Warhammer 40,000 can't be played competitively. Of course it can. It just requires more of an investment than maybe other games that exist. And to build on that point, what that can also do is make it quite tough barrier of entry from a casual player to a competitive player, because there's so much more of a demand and things that you need to get in your head and learn. There are so many more things you've got to take into consideration and be aware of to get good at the game. That can be a problem because it creates a smaller pool of competitive gamers and makes it harder for people to buy in and grow that aspect of the hobby. Having said that, Warhammer 40,000 is absolutely enormous. It's a monster. Tournaments sell out left, right and centre, and it clearly doesn't have an issue with getting new people into the game. So take that one with a pinch of salt. Another thing that rules bloat does is it creates really, really long games. Like, because you have so many rules and stratagems you could access, and because Warhammer 40,000, yeah, you can play on a clock, but it's not as sharp as clocks you're playing other games where you just time runs out, that's it. The round times are really long. You find yourself in situations where you're like, well, I'm sure there's a stratagem for this. Let me just go have a look. And you come up with your rule books, and you're flicking through all your rule books, you try to find these stratagems. I'm sure there's something I can do for this. It creates this really long process. There's a bit of a meme of Warhammer 40,000 players always having like multiple rule books out, and a lot of players from other systems look at Warhammer 40,000 and go, why have you got so many rule books? Why haven't you just got things on a card in front of you? Like, it's crazy that you're always getting these books out. And I've found myself flicking through the Imperial Knights book and the cards that I've got, looking for stratagems, try to find all these stratagems. And yeah, you can get some rules on cards, but there's so many, it's insane. Like, there's just a ridiculous amount of cards to flick through. And yes, some people I'm sure are hearing that going, well, you could just organise it beforehand and split them into piles, a bit like the picture that I showed from Reddit. You could do that, but there's still, even so, there's a substantial number to go through. And you know, until you've got an incredible grasp of the stratagems, there's always that bit in your head that's like, maybe there is just a stratagem that I can find that can stop this happening. Maybe there's something in there. So the nature of lots of rules makes long games. And again, that's not an absolute disaster, but as a competitive player, I think the best competitive games are quite fluid and they're fun to watch. Like when I was playing War Machine, the top tables, people would be sat watching, enjoying the interaction, and two people playing. Like, it would be a fluid, you know, interactive game. Warhammer 40,000, I think, is a little bit harder to watch because there's the rule after rule and people dive into it. And again, I also recognise that at the upper tables, at the top tables, that happens less. But I am talking about all competitive gaming here and not just focusing on the people that have an exceptional grasp of the rules, play very frequently, and are winning tournaments. I'm taking a much broader approach and perspective. Testing microphone, check. So I think they're the main issues or negatives with rules bloat, but there are some positives, or at least two that I can think of. The first is that as a competitive player, lots of rules give you lots of options, and that can be a rewarding, enjoyable experience. Throwing yourself in and learning all the stratagems and all the different ways you can apply and use your list against other problems that your opponent is presenting is a fun experience, and feeling like there are rules and things there you can do to prevent losing a model, or, you know, losing a unit, getting pushed back in the game. That's a fun experience. It's good to have those options available. So that's my main kind of reflections. Yes, there is a rules bloat, and I do think it causes some problems for competitive play. I think that if memory recollection and just, playing games to learn the rules is a key skill factor, then I think there are some limitations in how competitive a rule set can be. Like, there is definitely a skill in memory recollection. The best players at the best wargaming players are able to remember lots of rules and lots of interactions. That's obvious. You obviously need to be able to have a brain that can hold a lot of information. But it's a shame if that skill has so much more of an emphasis and a priority compared to everything else. And again, I appreciate that the upper tiers of competitive gaming, this is less of an issue, but I'm speaking about the full spectrum of experience, the full bubble of players that exist. So it's not an absolute disaster. Warhammer 40,000 at this stage, I think, can still be played very competitively, can still be a really fun, rewarding experience with lots going on, but there's probably a little bit too much of a rules bloat, and I would hope that in the next edition, Games Workshop tone that down and recognise that, but don't go too far the other way. They've got a bit of habit, haven't they, of like just sledgehammering things and going completely the other way. I've already seen chat and discussion around them just removing toughness entirely. That, I think, I'm not even going to start talking about that right now. Let's even see if it happens. It's a pointless discussion. But I'm still enjoying it. I think the rules are interesting. I'm excited for a 10th edition. I'd like to see what they do. I'd like to see what they reflect on. And yeah, I'll certainly keep my eye on it. But for now, I can say with confidence, there are too many rules, and that overall probably has a negative experience on competitive play. Although it's not the absolute end of the world, doom and gloom, can't be played competitively. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the game that I had the other week against Anthony. He took Blood Angels, I took Imperial Knights. It was a really good game. I enjoyed it loads, but there are a few things that I learned that kind of reinforce with me things that I need to take into my next game. The first is that I should absolutely keep a track of my own score and not rely on someone else to do it. That's not ideal. It does your opponent's head in. Although Anthony didn't suggest that it was doing his head in, but it would do my head in if I had to keep track of everybody's score. And although I think it's good etiquette for both players to keep track of score, and a bit like we talked about the playing with intent in the last episode, kind of be like, this is the score, right? You scored this, yeah, and just have an ongoing agreement turn by turn as to what the score is. Don't get to the final round, turn 5, and be like, oh yeah, you're on 57, yeah? And your opponent will be like, I'm 75. How we get there? Like, there needs to be an ongoing discussion around what the score is and an ongoing agreement. But it's obviously best if both players do that and record it. I tried to record it on an app. The app went wrong. I put it in wrong, and it all went bad, and I ended up just relying on Anthony. But from a competitive experience, what happened is the first few turns, I wasn't paying enough attention to the scenario, the objectives. I was just thinking about attrition and trying to kill as much as possible. So I obviously reflected on that like from turn 1, I need to be thinking more aggressively about scenario. It nearly cost me the game. It was so close. I won by like a couple of points, but I only won because it was like the back end of the game. I was like, I really need to start thinking more about scoring points rather than just shooting and killing models. I got too carried away with my big lads running around, stomping things, living the dream, just shooting Blood Angels, going wild. I was not paying enough attention, whereas Anthony was playing smart, making sure he grabbed those objectives, putting things into a strategic reserve and then bringing them down to score some key points. And it was only when he started doing that I was like, oh, okay, I'm really gonna have to lock in now and make sure I'm scoring enough points. So that was a good experience observation for me to have. Second thing is, like, Anthony was really sound. He told me all the rules beforehand. He was really, really, really great throughout the game. But there was a pre-game move that he did that I completely had not registered when he told me that was a thing, and he ended up charging like a jetpacked Death Watch like right in to the middle of my entire army. It was super ropey on my end, and like I was instantly getting hit by all sorts of thunder hammers and stuff like that. I was like, oh my god, this is an absolute nightmare. And I remember that first turn being like, Anthony, this is horrible. Like it was a gotcha moment, right? That was a gotcha moment, being like, oh man, I didn't realize that was a thing. Bang, getting charged right off the beginning. And in hindsight, I should have deployed my models like 7-8 inches back if I'd have known that was a thing. Although Anthony had said and been very open about the rules, he was a great opponent, I just didn't stick in my head that was the thing. So at the beginning of the game, I was like, oh man, this is really over. This is really bad. It's terrible for me. But because I hadn't played enough games of Warhammer 40,000, I didn't really appreciate that it was a gotcha, but like it wasn't the most significant thing that ever happened in the world. Like, but because I didn't know enough about the rules and the interactions, I just didn't know how it was going to play out. So I assumed there were. So my other observation, I think, makes a more pleasant experience for everybody, is to discuss that stuff at the end. Whereas I was like, turn 1, Anthony, I mean, we were having a laugh about it. But I was like, oh my god, what's going on? Like, I can't believe this has happened now. But I think, yeah, do that at the end, because I'm used to playing a game like War Machine where something like that, that's it. It's over. You're done. Like, you've completely lost the game. Whereas Warhammer 40,000, there is a bit more flex. It's a bit less like, oh, okay, well, it's not the absolute end of the world. Although I'll tell you what, if his dice had been good and he'd have blown up my paladin, my warlord, it would have been pretty bad. It would have been. Other bits of feedback and thoughts is the club is great, really nice community. People come over and chat to you in your games. There's a really nice vibe to it. I really, really enjoy it. It's a pretty cool venue, even though it's in this like oldie worldy pub, King and Queen in Brighton, and then downstairs, like towards the back end of the night, loads of students come in and start doing karaoke. We've got like a private room, so they don't bother you, just out on your own. But you just hear like a pure massacre, like students just massacring song after so sweet. It's horrendous, but it's beautiful horrendous. I mean, it's just a symphony of idiotic students, which can be quite fun. And apparently, whoever comes last in the league has to go do a song. So that's why I ain't coming last in this league, lads and girls. I ain't coming last. With regards to my list, I still don't feel like I'm in a position where I can start sharing my list and my tech and talking about it. That would be further down the line in terms before I get too into the crunchier side of the game. But I'm enjoying playing Imperial Knights. They're tanking hard. They're taking a lot of hits, like big vehicles charging and stomping around the table is pretty cool. You get to roll lots of dice. And also, like as a hobby project, there's such fun, enjoyable models to paint and put together. So like the competitive side that I'm enjoying is also being matched up by the hobby aspect of the game, which is great as well. In future episodes, once I'm a bit more confident, once I have just got more games in, more experience, I'll talk more specifically about my list, and we'll be having more like crunchy meta chats, but I like to do things in nice, comfortable stages. So for now, I'm just going to keep sharing my reflections and examining the game, and in future, we'll get a bit crunchier with everything. Cool, so I think that's it from me. Warhammer 40,000 remains a lot of fun. I'd love to hear what you guys think in the comments below. Do you think there's too much of a rules bloat for Warhammer 40,000? Does it impact competitive gaming in the way that I've described? What's your experience of it? I'd really, really like to hear your comments and feedback. It's all just my ideas. You know, I'm not precious about being challenged. I have half the time no idea whether I'm right or wrong, more than half the time. So I really appreciate any feedback or commentary on it. Thanks so much for watching the show. Please like and subscribe for more, and I will see you next time. Cheers.